The unseen witness. The musty air of the attic pressed down on Alara, thick with the scent of forgotten things and her own quiet despair. Dust motes danced in the anemic shafts of moonlight that pierced the grime-caked window, illuminating the stark reality of her prison. Her stomach growled, a hollow ache that mirrored the emptiness in her heart. 3 days. 3 days since Don Moretti's men had dragged her here, since she'd seen what she shouldn't have seen. The glint of steel, the muffled cries, the chilling finality. She shuddered, pulling the thin, threadbare blanket tighter around her. A faint scratching sound from above made her freeze. It wasn't the scurry of a mouse, this was deliberate, rhythmic. Tap tap pause tap. Her breath hitched. Was it a signal? Hope, a dangerous, fragile thing, flickered within her. She scrambled to her feet, her gaze fixed on the ceiling directly above the old iron-bound trunk. The tapping continued, faint but insistent. It was almost a code, a pattern. She tried to replicate it on the wall, a hesitant tap-tap pause tap with her knuckles. Silence. Then, a distinct thump from the floor above, followed by a soft, almost imperceptible scrape. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Someone was there. Someone new. Hours later, the moon had dipped, and the first hints of pre-dawn gray streaked the sky. The silence of the attic was absolute, broken only by the frantic rhythm of her own breathing. Just as she was about to surrender to the crushing weight of her isolation, a faint click echoed from the attic door. Alara froze, her muscles tensing. The rusty hinges groaned as the door creaked open, revealing not Moretti's brutish enforcers, but a silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura of quiet power that seemed to fill the cramped space. Alara? The voice was a low rumble, instantly recognizable despite its hushed tone. It was him. Kale. The Alpha King. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring his already indistinct form. Kale. Her voice was a ragged whisper, thick with relief and disbelief. He moved swiftly, silently, crossing the room in 3 long strides. The air around him shimmered with a subtle energy she remembered, a primal scent of pine and rain that cut through the mustiness. He reached her, his large hands gently cupping her face. His thumb stroked her cheek, sending a jolt of warmth through her. "I told you I'd find you," he murmured, his eyes, molten gold even in the dim light, burning into hers. "You are mine, Alara. Always." The claim was not a question, but an undeniable truth. He pulled her against him, a powerful arm wrapping around her waist, lifting her effortlessly as he turned towards the door. The attic, her cage, was already a distant memory. A prisoner of dust. The attic air, thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten things, pressed in on Alara. Dust motes danced in the lone shaft of sunlight piercing the grime-coated window, each particle a tiny, glittering prison. Her throat was raw from a night of silent tears, and her eyes, still puffy, scanned the familiar space for the 100th time. The old trunk in the corner, the rocking horse with its chipped paint, the stacks of mildewed books, they were no longer comforting relics, but rather monuments to her captivity. A faint scratching at the door, barely audible over the distant city hum, sent a jolt through her. It wasn't the usual heavy thud of Lucia's guards delivering her meager meal. This was lighter, more insistent. Hope, a dangerous ember, flickered. She scrambled to her feet, her dress clinging to her, and pressed an ear to the rough-hewn wood. "Alara?" The whisper, low and resonant, vibrated through the door, through her very bones. It was him. Kale. She choked back a sob of relief, her hand flying to her mouth. "Kale," she whispered back, her voice a reedy croak. A moment of silence, then a metallic click, impossibly soft. The heavy bolt, which had been her constant torment, slid back. The door creaked inward, revealing Kale's silhouette against the brighter landing. He looked feral, somehow. His dark hair was disheveled, a faint smear of dirt on his jawline, but his eyes, those piercing golden eyes, burned with an intensity that promised vengeance. He stepped inside, filling the small space with his presence, and the scent of pine and something distinctly wild. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His gaze swept over her, taking in her disheveled state, the fear still etched on her face, and a muscle ticked in his jaw. "I told you, didn't I?" he murmured, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the dust-laden air. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "I told you I'd find you. You are mine, Elara. And no one, not even Lucia, keeps what's mine." The air crackled with a power she hadn't felt since their last encounter. He pulled her against him, a fierce, possessive embrace that chased away the chill of her confinement. His heart hammered against hers, a powerful rhythm that promised an end to her dusty prison. The Alpha's unease. Elias stood on the precipice of the cliff overlooking the churning obsidian sea, the wind whipping his dark hair across his face. The scent of ozone and salt filled the air, but beneath it, a faint, disquieting tang of something else, something unnatural, clung to the breeze. He had found her, yes, extracted her from the dusty prison Giovanni had built, the attic reeking of forgotten dreams and stale fear. His Luna. But the relief that should have surged through him was muted, replaced by a gnawing unease. "Anything, Alpha?" Kalen's voice, rough with concern, broke through Elias's thoughts. The beta stood a respectful distance away, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the Blackwood Pack's trailing scouts. Elias shook his head, his gaze still fixed on the violent waves. "Only a feeling. A cold spot in the warmth." He thought of the girl, bruised and brittle, yet with an unyielding spark in her eyes that had claimed him irrevocably. He had murmured the words, the ancient claim, as he carried her from that house of horrors. "I already claim you for myself." The words had felt like a brand on his tongue, a vow etched into his very being. But Giovanni's silence since the extraction was deafening. The human mafia boss was not one to let a slight, let alone a territorial trespass and the abduction of his asset, go unpunished. The lack of pursuit, the absence of any retaliatory move, was what truly unsettled Elias. It was too quiet. Too easy. A flicker of movement below caught his eye, a lone wolf, its fur the color of twilight, darting between the shadowed rocks. It wasn't one of his own. It moved with a predatory grace that spoke of a different lineage, a different allegiance. "We have company," Elias stated, his voice low and dangerous. Kalen tensed, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of the ceremonial dagger at his side. "Blackwood?" Kalen questioned, his eyes narrowed. Elias's jaw tightened. "No. Too subtle for Blackwood. This feels like a prelude. A serpent in the grass, not a roaring lion." He knew, with a primal certainty, that Giovanni wasn't merely licking his wounds. The human had played a long game, and Elias had a chilling suspicion that rescuing his Luna was only the first move in a much larger, more perilous one. The unease sharpened into a cold dread. He had claimed her, yes. But keeping her safe might prove to be his greatest challenge yet. The scent of sorrow. The attic's stagnant breath, heavy with the aroma of forgotten lives and her own gnawing despair, stirred. Through the grimy pane, a sliver of moon, like a chipped bone, etched elongated, twisted shadows across the stacked trunks and shrouded furnishings. Elara drew her knees tighter, the rough wool of the blanket offering scant warmth. Days, perhaps weeks, had congealed into a blurred eternity within this dusty confinement. Don Moretti, her captor, had delivered on his chilling vow. She'd witnessed too much, overheard the hushed blueprints for territorial dominion, and now she was a liability. The icy finality in his gaze as he'd slammed the heavy bolt still seized her gut. A faint scratching, no louder than a scuttling mouse, startled her. She lifted her head, every nerve strung taut. It came again, a deliberate, rhythmic rasp against the wooden frame of the access panel. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Hope, a perilous, delicate bloom, dared to unfurl in her chest. Moretti wouldn't be so surreptitious. The panel shuddered, then slowly, with a creak that reverberated through the suffocating quiet, began to recede. A beam of moonlight illuminated a pair of eyes, piercingly blue and framed by dark, tousled hair. Lysander. He was here. A gasp caught in her throat, a choked sob of relief and disbelief. He slid the panel fully open, revealing the immense breadth of his shoulders. The scent of pine and something else, something wild and untamed, flooded the small space, momentarily eclipsing the stale air. He dropped lightly into the attic, his gaze sweeping over her, a flicker of raw fury in his eyes swiftly replaced by a profound tenderness. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. He knelt before her, his large hand gently cupping her cheek. The calloused warmth was a stark contrast to the persistent cold she'd endured. "I told you I'd find you." She could only nod, tears finally overflowing, carving paths through the grime on her face. He pulled her into his arms, a firm embrace that felt like sanctuary after an endless pilgrimage. "He'll pay for this," Lysander murmured, his voice laced with a dangerous edge, "for every moment you spent in this desolation." He held her tighter, pressing his face into her hair. "I already claimed you for myself, remember? No one keeps what's mine." The promise in his words was both a balm and a shiver of warning for any who dared to impede him. The King's Ride. The crisp morning air, though still carrying the chill of the highlands, was a welcome balm against Ilara's skin. She sat astride a magnificent roan mare, its coat the color of dried blood, beside King Theron. He, on a powerful black stallion, seemed less a man and more a force of nature, his presence radiating a quiet intensity that both unnerved and comforted her. The forest, a tapestry of ancient oak and towering pine, unfolded before them, dappled sunlight piercing the canopy like golden arrows. "We ride for the northern foothills," Theron's voice rumbled, deep and resonant. "My scouts reported movement near the old border pass. Bandits, perhaps, or something, less human." His gaze, sharp and assessing, flickered to her. "Can you keep pace?" Ilara squared her shoulders, a ghost of her former fear replaced by a burgeoning resolve. "I can, Your Majesty." The weeks since her rescue had been a whirlwind, a blur of healing bombs, hurried lessons in court etiquette, and the ever-present, watchful eyes of Theron. The attic, with its dust and despair, felt like a lifetime ago. They rode in comfortable silence for a time, the rhythmic thud of hooves against earth the only sound. Ilara found herself observing Theron, the subtle flex of muscles beneath his tunic as he guided his horse, the way his jaw tightened when he scanned the horizon. He was a king, yes, but also a warrior, a protector. A part of her, a newly awakened part, stirred at the thought. Suddenly, Theron reined in his stallion, a hand raised. Ilara followed suit, her mare snorting softly. The air grew heavy, an oppressive stillness settling over the woods. A faint scent, acrid and metallic, pricked at her senses. It was the smell of blood. "Stay close," Theron commanded, his voice a low growl. He drew a long sword from its scabbard, the steel glinting in the filtered light. Ahead, through the dense undergrowth, a clearing came into view. What they saw there made Ilara's breath catch in her throat. A mangled deer lay on the ground, its throat torn open, but the wounds were not those of a wolf. They were too precise, too deliberate. And standing over the carcass, hunched and shrouded in tattered cloaks, were three figures. Their forms were vaguely human, but their movements were jerky, unnatural. As one turned its head, Ilara saw eyes that glowed with an eerie, predatory light. "Werewolves," Theron muttered, a dangerous edge to his tone. "And they're bolder than usual." He dismounted, his movements fluid and swift, his eyes never leaving the creatures. "Stay on your horse, Ilara. Be ready to ride." A shiver ran down Ilara's spine, but it wasn't entirely of fear. A strange exhilaration, born of the wild, untamed world she now inhabited, surged within her. This was not the life she knew, but it was the life Theron had brought her to. A king's demand. The heavy oak doors of the audience chamber groaned shut behind Alara, the sound echoing the sudden pressure in her chest. King Theron, a figure of imposing stature even seated, regarded her with eyes the color of polished obsidian. He had found her, just as he promised, but the relief was short-lived, replaced by a fresh, unsettling dread. Across the vast, tapestried room, Enzo, looking entirely too comfortable in his gilded cage, offered her a smirk that promised nothing but trouble. Alara, the king's voice was a low rumble, a sound that vibrated through the very floorboards. My mate, return to me. His gaze swept over her, possessive and unwavering. And yet, I find you, unclaimed. A shiver traced its way down her spine. The words were a direct challenge, a public declaration of his intent that left no room for argument. She felt the eyes of the assembled court upon her, 100 pairs of eyes assessing, judging. Enzo's smirk widened. Your Majesty, Alara began, her voice steadier than she felt, I am grateful for your rescue, but I am not. Theron raised a hand, cutting her off. Grateful is not enough, little one. You carry my mark, though it is faint. You belong to me, and the time for games is over. He leaned forward, his knuckles white against the carved armrest of his throne. I demand the full claiming, Alara. Before this court, before my people, you will accept your place as my queen. The air in the chamber crackled with tension. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had expected a plea, a request, perhaps even a gentle coaxing. Not a demand. Not an ultimatum delivered with such steely resolve. Her gaze flickered to Enzo, who had subtly shifted, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a concealed dagger. He was waiting, watching. I need time, Alara finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. The idea of being bound, completely and utterly, to this powerful, unpredictable man, terrified her. The attic had been a prison, but at least there, she was alone. Here, she would be perpetually observed, forever under his formidable thumb. Theron's jaw tightened. Time is a luxury we do not possess, Alara. The scent of you, unclaimed, is an affront to my blood. You are mine. Say the words, and let us put this matter to rest. His eyes, dark and intense, pierced through her, leaving no doubt that refusal was not an option. The weight of his will pressed down on her, suffocating. The attic's rescue. The scent of dust and ancient wood filled Alara's lungs, a familiar, oppressive smell that had been her constant companion for weeks. She pressed her ear to the floorboards, straining to hear anything over the frantic thump of her own heart. Below, the muffled shouts of the Dawn's men grew louder, closer. Her capture was inevitable if she stayed. A faint scratching sound, barely audible, made her freeze. It wasn't a rat. This was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Hope, a fragile thing, flickered. It came from the small, grimy window at the far end of the attic, high above the floor. She scrambled towards it, her dress snagging on forgotten boxes, her fingers brushing away cobwebs thick as old lace. As she reached the sill, a shard of glass, already loose, clinked to the floor. Through the gap, a hand, strong and tanned, reached in, beckoning. Relief washed over her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. It was him. Just as he'd promised. He was here. Alara, quickly. His voice, a low rumble, was music to her ears. The rope. Secure it. A thick, knotted rope snaked through the opening. Her fingers, trembling with adrenaline, fumbled with the knots, securing it around the sturdy support beam near the window. Below, the Dawn's men were now directly beneath the attic, their heavy boots thudding against the stairs. Time was a luxury she didn't have. Go, he urged, his face a shadow in the moonlight. I'll follow. She didn't hesitate. Gripping the rough fibers, she swung herself out, the cold night air biting at her exposed skin. The ground seemed impossibly far below, but his presence, a steadying anchor, gave her courage. Her arms screamed, muscles burning, as she descended. Halfway down, a shot rang out, shattering the attic window above. Glass rained down around her. He was right behind her, a protective shield. He landed beside her, his powerful arms sweeping around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. The scent of pine and something uniquely masculine filled her senses, replacing the musty attic air. His lips brushed her ear, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine. "I already claim you for myself," he murmured, his voice a possessive growl. "You're safe now." He tightened his grip, pulling her into the cover of the dense forest, leaving the dawn's wrath and the suffocating attic far behind. Claimed by the Alpha King. The musty air of the attic, a scent of forgotten things and stale fear, still clung to her, even as the Alpha King's powerful scent, an intoxicating blend of pine and something wild, enveloped her. He held her close, a stark contrast to the rough hands of her captors. "You're safe now," his voice rumbled, a deep vibration against her ear that chased away the lingering echoes of her uncle's threats. Her heart, which had been a frantic bird trapped in a cage, began to slow its frantic rhythm. She looked up, her gaze meeting eyes that held the ancient wisdom of a predator and the fierce protectiveness of a mate. How did you find me?" she whispered, the words barely audible. A possessive growl vibrated through his chest. "My wolf knew. He felt your fear, your pain. He knew where you were hidden, even when no human would have dared look." He ran a thumb along her cheekbone, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine, not of fear, but of an unfamiliar, exhilarating awareness. "My uncle, he'll kill me if he finds out I'm gone." The reality of her situation, the dangerous world she'd stumbled into, threatened to overwhelm the fragile sense of security. "He won't touch you again," the Alpha King stated, his voice laced with unyielding certainty. He lifted her into his arms, the ease with which he carried her a testament to his strength. "You are mine now. And no one, not even a human boss, dares challenge my claim." His declaration, "I already claim you for myself," hung in the air, a potent decree that resonated deep within her, igniting a spark she hadn't known existed. It wasn't a question, but an undeniable statement of ownership, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt not fear, but a strange, thrilling sense of belonging. As he carried her down the creaking stairs, leaving behind the dark attic and her past life, she found herself leaning into his strength, into the promise of a future she never knew she desired. The moonlight, filtering through a grimy window, illuminated a path she hadn't chosen, but one that felt undeniably, profoundly right. A new beginning. The crisp morning air, though still carrying the chill of the previous night, felt like a balm against Alara's skin. Sunlight, a golden promise, streamed through the large window of the royal suite, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She traced the intricate patterns on the heavy velvet drapes, a stark contrast to the rough, splintered wood of her attic prison. A shiver, not of cold, but of memory, ran down her spine. Kalen, ever observant, paused in the act of buttoning his silken tunic. "A bad dream?" His voice, a low rumble, was laced with concern. She shook her head, turning to face him. He looked every inch the Alpha King, his powerful frame exuding authority even in the casual morning light. "Just remembering. It's hard to believe I'm actually here." He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You are. And you're safe." His thumb stroked her skin, a gesture that sent warmth blossoming through her. "But the city isn't. We received word from my scouts. The Dawn's men are regrouping, bolder than ever. They're targeting the outskirts, trying to destabilize the region." Alara's breath hitched. "They won't stop, will they?" "Not as long as I'm alive." Kalen's jaw tightened. "They won't touch you. Not again." His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a fierce possessiveness that both thrilled and intimidated her. I'm calling a council meeting. We need to solidify our defenses, and more importantly, our strategy to dismantle their operations for good. He paused, his gaze softening. You don't have to be a part of this, Ilara. You've been through enough. But I want to be. Her voice was firm, surprising even herself. I saw what they did. I know their methods. If I can help, I will. The thought of hiding away, while Kaelin faced the danger alone, was unbearable. She had been a victim long enough. He studied her for a long moment, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Very well. But you stay by my side. He led her towards a table laden with an array of breakfast delicacies she hadn't seen in years. First, we eat. Then, we plan. The aroma of freshly baked bread and sweet fruit filled the air, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of fear that had once defined her days. As she bit into a ripe strawberry, its juice bursting on her tongue, Ilara felt a nascent strength stirring within her. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about reclaiming her life, with a king by her side.